trouble. Could this Eagles game be possible trouble for the Birds? On the line right now, he does a tremendous job. He joins us covering the Eagles for NBC Sports Philadelphia. He joins us each and every Friday. At this point, it's Dave Zangaro on the Comcast Business Hotline. How you doing today, Dave?
I'm doing well. It's funny because you're right. Like, on paper, this game is what you would call a trap game, but the Eagles are a much better team, and they should win easily.
They absolutely should. Now, I have in front of you Isaiah Rodgers savoring every moment since return to NFL that you wrote for NBC Sports Philadelphia.com, and obviously adds more significance with Slay being out. What do we expect from Rodgers? Obviously, he comes into the game, causes the interception. You've been around this team a whole lot. You're around him on a training camp. What do you think we get from Isaiah Rodgers on Sunday now that he's starting opposite Quinyon Mitchell?
Sure. It's a fascinating situation. Obviously, the story itself is a unique one after he sat out all of last season on suspension. But to me, it's kind of an eye to the future, perhaps. He only has this year on his contract. But, we'll see what happens. Slay is obviously getting older, and this could be a tryout for him for the future. It's exciting from that perspective, and I think it's a nice, easy game for him in some respects. The Jaguars' offense, they just lost Christian Kirk. Their other two top receivers are banged up. So, I think it's a good spot for him to be in. Now, I do think they're going to try to go after him a little bit. Quinyon Mitchell has been so solid on the other side of the field that if I'm the Jaguars, I'm going to try to throw the football. I'm going to attack Isaiah Rodgers a little bit, similar to what the Bengals did last week. I was impressed by Rodgers all summer. I thought he played pretty well. There was a good portion of this summer where we thought he was going to be a starting outside corner. Eventually, Quinyon Mitchell, they deemed was ready, and they nailed that one. He has certainly been ready. And what I talked to Isaiah about this week is that I think that would have frustrated a lot of guys in his position, but he's just so grateful to even be on a team right now and to be able to play that it hasn't bothered him as much, and he's tried to stay ready, and he'll finally get a chance on Sunday.
Dave, is this a good game considering, Trevor Lawrence with limited receivers? Is this a good game to attack Trevor Lawrence to get some blitzes in and maybe work on some things in that way?
Yeah, I mean, they can. I also don't know if they're really going to need to get to him. He is a player, though, that if you put pressure on him, you can get consistent pressure on him. He'll make some mistakes. He'll turn the football over. He's good for a few kind of confusing plays a game where he gets some pressure in his face and he makes a poor decision and he'll cough it up. So I think you can try to confuse him a little bit, but I also think you don't really need to send the house to get pressure on him. Another backup left tackle who's now their starter in Walker Little. They traded Cam Robinson earlier this week to the Vikings. So an opportunity for the guys on that side of the ball to beat a left tackle. So Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham typically line up on that side of the offensive line. So they'll have a chance to get to Trevor Lawrence in this game. And then the back end, I think there are going to be plays for them to make to get some takeaways, which they finally got one through the air last week, an interception, just their third interception in 7 games. This is another opportunity for them to get one. Maybe a cornerback can finally get an interception in this game. It hasn't happened yet.
Switching over to the offense, for a lot of fans, a lot of media members, they thought that the game plan against the Bengals was the best one they saw in a while. I know that the Jags have a couple good pass rushers, but overall not a great defense. Do you think they can build on that this week?
Yeah, it's a pretty bad defense, and it's not because they don't have some good players. They have 2 pretty good edge rushers. They have 3 good linebackers, but overall that unit it's not getting enough pressure up front, and it's not covering on the back end, which is kind of a recipe for disaster. The Eagles should have no problem getting yards and scoring points on this defense. Now, obviously, there's that there's a reason you play the games, and you have to see it, but based on what the Jags have done so far this year and based on the game the Eagles just had against the Bengals, there's no reason to think they can't put up points on them. Now, the Jags have been better against the run than they have been against the pass, so I'm kind of curious to see what happens there. The Eagles have been working to run the football and stick with the run a little bit more, and I was impressed that even in that Browns game where Jim Schwartz was kind of loading the box and they weren't really making much hay in the run game, they still stuck with it. And I think that's important, especially when you have a player like Saquon Barkley who has that big play threat, because, I mean, he can be bottled up for an entire game and then break one, which changes the entire script. So I'd like to see them continue to do that. It's not that they can't pass the ball. I think they'll have opportunities to do both in this game, but over the last few weeks, they've struck such a fun balance on offense, and they've reintroduced a lot more play action, which kind of backs up and feeds off of the run game, and it's been fun to watch. And you're right, it kind of finally feels like the offense that we've been waiting for the whole season.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at this game, a lot of people have been waiting for Jalen Hurts to have one of those crooked number games in the passing game. This, to me, kind of looks like one of those that it could happen, though. Am I right?
Yeah, I think so. I really do think they'll be able to throw the football on them. You have A.J. Brown, you have Devontae Smith. Still no Dallas Goedert in this one. He was ruled out, but plenty of firepower. When you look at the offensive line, you get Mekhi Becton back in this game. Fred Johnson has done a nice job filling in for Jordan Mailata. It's amazing. They're down Mailata, they're down Dallas Goedert, but this offense is still so talented that you feel pretty good about it. And you look around, and there's still a bunch of talent out there, and the way Saquon's been playing makes you feel really good about it too. So plenty of firepower. This Jags defense has been bad, guys. It's been a bad defense all of this season, and they've played some tough games. You know, they played a really tight game against the Packers last week, so it's not like they're laying down, right? They're playing tough, and they haven't given up on Doug Peterson, but there's a talent deficit there, and on defense, they just haven't been very good.
We're speaking with Dave Zangaro. He does a tremendous job covering the Eagles for NBC Sports Philadelphia. Let's hit on that offensive line. You mentioned no Mailata. We were very aware when we spoke to you last week. Fred Johnson was coming off a lot of struggles in that Giants game. He did get some help, but he was much better. There's credit, obviously some goes to him, but it's also Stoutland, once again, molding a guy and getting the most out of a guy, because he looked much improved against the pass, in pass blocking last week compared to the week before.
Absolutely. Now, Fred deserves most of the credit. He's out there doing it, but, yeah, I mean, Jeff Stoutland has done this year after year after year. It's not a coincidence that they seem to continue to roll even when they're missing a guy or two on that offensive line. The only time we've ever really seen them struggle is when they get decimated on the offensive line. But he gets these guys ready to play, and they buy in. And the Fred Johnson story is a really cool one, because earlier in his career, he thought he was destined to either be out of the league or be a journeyman. And he comes here and he starts buying in, and he starts listening to Stout. And in the beginning, he kind of didn't understand why Stout was on him as much as he was, but that's what Jeff Stoutland does. He coaches every single player he has like they're starters. And that's an easy thing to say, but I think it's a lot harder to do. But it really pays off when you're in a situation where a backup has to step in for multiple games and be a starter. And that's not to say that Fred Johnson won't struggle from time to time. He's not Jordan Mailata, who's one of the best tackles in the league. But, yeah, last week was pretty incredible. It wasn't like he was one-on-one against Trey Hendrickson for the entire game, but inevitably there are going to be moments where you are one-on-one and you have to hold up, and he did against one of the best pass rushers in the league. He deserves a ton of credit, and I think Jeff Stoutland deserves some too. In your eyes, what is the way that the Jaguars could even keep this game close? If the turnover problem on offense pops up again, Jalen Hurts has obviously been much better controlling the football. He had that one bad pass last week, a turnover-worthy play to Kenny Gainwell in the flat. I mean, that would have been a disastrous play if that's like a pick six. It might have changed the entire scope of that game. But aside from that, he's been really good protecting the football. And in a game where you're the better team, where you're favored by, I think, like 7.5 points, the way you end up losing is you turn the football over and you make uncharacteristic mistakes. So they have to avoid those in this game. You look at the Jaguars' offense. Trevor Lawrence, like I mentioned, he will turn the ball over. He'll make some kind of head-scratcher plays. He'll make some good plays, too. He can run the football a little bit. He can beat you with his arms. So it would take – and they're getting some big plays out of him, too, and that offense. So I think that would be the recipe if you're trying to figure out how this goes wrong. I think if Jalen Hurts turns the ball over and that issue pops up again, and then on defense, it's just a couple of big plays from Trevor Lawrence that you end up on the wrong side of.
Well, great stuff as usual, Dave. We really appreciate you spending the time with us. Everybody should read about all your stuff, but Isaiah Rodgers savoring every moment since return to NFL. To get a little background on the young man before he starts on Sunday. Have a great weekend, Dave, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right, sounds good, guys. Take care.
All right, that was Dave Zangaro on the Comcast Business Hotline.